Hello, welcome Cloud Gurus, and in this lecture we're going to look at how to create a load balancer and how to perform health checks. So the first thing I want you to do is to log into your EC2 instance, and if you can just elevate your privileges to root level. And so then what we want to do is we want to go to the HTML directory, so cd var www/html, and this is the root directory for your web server. If you can't reach this directory, just make sure that you've got HTTPD in setup, or basically Apache set up and installed. So if you don't, just go yum install HTTPD, and that would install it. And then you just want to go to service HTTPD start, and that will start it if it hasn't already been started. And then you should just be able to go to this directory, and if you type in ls, you'll see our hello world index.html file that we created. And we're just going to create a new one. We're going to call it health check. So I want you to type in nano healthcheck.html, and in here we're just going to write I am healthy, and then you hit Control X and hit save, and then enter. And if we hit ls, you'll be able to see I am healthy, or the healthcheck.html file. So now what we want to do is just go over to our EC2 console, and we want to go into EC2, and we're going to go down to load balancers. Currently we don't have any load balancers configured, so we're going to create a new one. And it's pretty straightforward, so we're going to call this our production LB, production load balancer. That's going to be its name. Here we can select where we're going to create the load balancer, so we're going to do this inside our default VPC for now. We can create an internal load balancer. Now basically an internal load balancer as opposed to an external load balancer simply means whether or not the load balancer is going to be internet facing. So when you if you create an internal load balancer, you would load balance using an internal IP address rather than a DNS entry, which would be for an external load balancer. So I'm going to just leave that for now and leave it as a external load balancer. And then we just say what ports we want. So let's say we want HTTP and HTTPS, so SSL. There we go. Hit continue. Actually, let's not do that because we don't actually have any HTTPS certificates. So I'm just going to go back and remove that rule. But you can have SSL offloading onto your AWS load balancers. So let's just make it a normal HTTP load balancer. Just keep it simple. And now we're going to configure our health check. So if we just go back to our terminal window, we'll remember we created a file called healthcheck.html. You could also run your health check to your index.html if that's your default landing page. It's really up to you. I just like to use my own separate file just to see that it is actually working. So this will be healthcheck.html. Now basically it's going to ping this page, or try and access this page over port 80, and the duration we set down here in the advanced details. So response timeout, this is how long it will try and access that page for, and if it times out, how long are you going to define the timeout period for. So do you want it for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, etc. We're just going to leave it as our 5-second default. And then the health check interval is how often it pings. So it's going to ping our healthcheck.html page every 30 seconds under this section. And then we define what an unhealthy threshold is and what a healthy threshold is. So an unhealthy threshold would be 2 consecutive unhealthy basically timeouts. So it's going to try and access the page twice over 30 seconds, and that will be unhealthy after a minute of not being able to access that page. So if a minute's downtime is acceptable for your users, or it's a minute before you start getting alarms and notifications, then that's fine. But you can also change this to be every 10 seconds, so that in that case you'd only have 2 unhealthy thresholds, would be a total of 20 seconds, because it's trying to ping at 10-second intervals twice. So I'm just going to leave it as the default, and healthy threshold basically says ping the load balancer and report this as healthy after 10 times of 30-second intervals. So effectively you're going to wait for 5 minutes before that comes in as healthy. Now I'm just going to lower this to make it a little bit easier for us, so maybe a healthy threshold is 3 successful pings of that page, which means that within 1 minute 30 I'll know whether or not that is going to be a healthy instance. Okay, we're going to go on and continue. We're going to put this into our Launch Wizard 1 security group. Notice how you can add it to multiple security groups. I'm just going to add it to the Launch Wizard 1 for now. Now we add our EC2 instances. So if you have multiple instances here, you would be able to select. Currently we only have 1, and if we just move this up a bit, so here you can say enable cross-zone load balancing, and that's basically what availability zones that this would load balance into. So if that was unchecked, currently it would just stay in EU West 1A, but because I'm going to check that, it will be in all availability zones across my region. And you probably want that from a design point of view by default, because when you spin up other EC2 instances, they may be in separate availability zones, and you want to be able to load balance to those availability zones. So I'm going to hit continue, and here I'm just going to create my tag. So this will be load balancer, and the value will just be my name. And then that way, if anyone sees, what is this load balancer, what's it doing, who owns it, they'll be able to see my name. Hit continue. Now we just review all the documentation, so all our load balancer rules, health check, our EC2 instances, etc. I'm just going to go in and hit create. Okay. And that's going and creating my load balancer currently. If we go to our health check and go to our instances rather, you'll see here it says out of service. So basically that's because it hasn't had 3 successful polls of my health check page, which is healthcheck.html. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pause the video, and then we'll refresh this page, and then hopefully in about 1:30 that will become healthy. Okay, and we can see that the status has changed from out of service to in service now. And if we click on our description, we can now see our DNS name. So why don't we go ahead and try and connect to this DNS address. So just going to hit Control and copy. And I'm just going to open up a new tab, and in the new tab I'll type in the DNS name, and hopefully, and then /healthcheck.html. And hopefully we'll be able to connect to our instance. So just give me 2 seconds. Okay, you can see the DNS name up here. So production /everything else .amazonaws.com /healthcheck.html. And you can see it's now resolving to our page that we created earlier in the lecture. So I am healthy. And it's really important to remember that when you're doing your DNS entries, you want to use your load balancer's DNS address as opposed to its IP address, because that IP address is going to change all the time, and Amazon actually just auto-manage that. So we'll cover this in a bit more detail in the Route 53 section, but it's just important to remember that for scalability and to make your website more dynamic, we need to resolve to the DNS name of the load balancer rather than the IP address. Amazon don't even give us the IP address, so just remember that for the exam, because that can come up as an exam question. Okay, so that covers off our load balancing section, and if you have enough time, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.